This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha. I'm back at you this week with another terrific video story. This one is titled Guy Dumps Girlfriend After She Rejects His Proposal and Cheats on Him. And this poor guy really takes it on the chin in the early part of this story, but don't fear, in the end he comes through and does the right thing. So let's get into this story and see what it's all about. He starts off and he says, I debated long and hard on whether to post this, but I could use the advice, so I decided to go for it. My girlfriend, who I'll call Wendy, and I are both 26 and have or had been a couple for the past 4.5 years. We met at the convention center while working a show there. Now I think this is like the second or third story I had where a couple got together at the convention center. What's going on there? He says back then we both had just started our first jobs out of college and had recently moved to the area where we live now. We exchanged business cards and left it there. The Sunday after the show, I was thinking about her and decided to send her a text asking if she'd like to go for a drink sometime. She got back to me right away and said she did and asked what day I had in mind. I asked if I could call her to discuss and she replied sure. I called and we talked for over 90 minutes. We had so many things in common, we just kept talking and talking. I knew from that conversation something big was going to happen between us. Right out of the gate, this guy had the love light in his eyes for this woman. We set a date for Wednesday evening at a place near her apartment. Though we live in the same general area, our places are a good 35 minutes apart, so I decided to be a gentleman and drive to her. Now that's a nice gesture that he did there, but he didn't have to do that. The first date was just for drinks, but we ended up hitting it off so well we stayed for dinner and didn't end up leaving until near closing time. He says nothing happened between us that night, but I knew the next time sparks were going to fly and I was prepared and looking forward to it. Now I'm assuming what he meant by being prepared is he brought his protection with him, which if he did, that's a good thing. 3 days later, we again met for dinner, but this time after dinner, I ended up staying the night at her place. In fact, I ended up staying all the way until late Sunday evening before heading home. I didn't want to leave, but I had to work the next day. The only thing I'll say is that I left there totally exhausted and completely out of ammunition, if you know what I mean. Yeah, OP, I think we all know what you mean. He says after that we officially became a couple. Our physical chemistry has always been incredible. At least it was for me. We've always gotten along really well and never argued. That is until recently. So here we go. After 4.5 years of being in what I thought was the relationship, and he says that in quotations, I felt the time was right to propose. He goes on and says she and I had talked about marriage numerous times and both agreed we wanted to get married to each other at some point, so I thought this would be a layup. I made reservations at one of her favorite places, and after dinner we ordered coffees and a dessert. It was at that time I brought out the ring box and handed it to her. She asked me what it was, and I told her, I think you know. She opened the box, and I can tell by her eyes she was shocked. I thought she was shocked by the large size of the rock as I had really splurged, but I was wrong. Let me stop right there for a second. Why did you splurge on a wedding ring? You should be putting that money away in something that's going to grow for your future. He says what she did next started the spiral that would eventually end our relationship. She looked up at me and said, I'm not ready for this. We're not ready for this, and handed me back the box. Ooh, wow, that had to hurt. I wasn't expecting that reaction and wasn't prepared and struggled for words. She could see my disappointment and quickly pivoted, saying she wants to marry me someday, but now just wasn't the right time. Seeing I wasn't taking it well, she came to my side of the table and started kissing on me and telling me how much she loved me, saying marriage wasn't necessary right now. She said something like, we should just enjoy things as they are, as our relationship has been so good. Now, most guys would hear that and say, hey, great, but this guy was upset. Her words did nothing to lift me, and I remained mostly quiet. We finished up with our food and then went back to her place. I stayed quiet on the drive back, and she was trying to get me to talk, but I was still processing everything. Yeah, he was probably in shock. When we got back to her place, she was all over me. I told her I wasn't feeling it, but she persisted and removed all her clothes and then started undressing me. I resisted at first, but then she started doing things I couldn't resist, so I just went with it. Oh man. I thought to myself, I deserve the special treatment after what just happened, but I didn't pay her back in kind. She did things to him, but he didn't do anything to her to reciprocate. He says it was a good night, but I was still reeling from being rejected and I wanted to get away to think about things. It was Saturday and she planned on us spending the day together, but I told her I needed some time alone and was going to leave. She was upset and didn't want me to go, but I told her I had to and she finally let me go. Well, what do you mean she let you go? You can just get up and walk out. I went straight home and sat around trying to figure out how I got things so wrong. She called me at least a half dozen times to check in, asking if I was okay, if we were okay, or if I needed anything. I sensed she was concerned about how I was handling things, and to be truthful, I wasn't happy. Well, seeing how this guy is and getting that rejection, I can understand how he was feeling down. While it was nice getting the attention from her, something had changed in our relationship. I didn't feel the same about her now. I began having doubts myself and started thinking she might not be the one. She came over to my place on Sunday and we immediately did the deed, then hung out by the pool for the rest of the day. Things seemed normal, but it all felt awkward. The following week, she called me every day at work to check in. She was worried I was disconnecting, and she should have been because I unknowingly was. So he's not getting over this. On Friday, she came over to my place and we planned to spend the weekend together. We met up with some friends that night and had a good time. On Saturday, we spent the morning at the pool, then went out to a sports bar to watch the baseball game. When we got back, we were discussing what we were going to watch on Netflix when she got up in my face, kissed me, and said yes. I knew what she meant, but I asked her what she was talking about. She replied, "Yes, I'll marry you." He says, "Gasp, I wasn't expecting that." Looking back now, maybe I should have told her yes and went with it, but I didn't. Instead, I told her I'd been thinking about us and came to the same conclusion she did last week. The time wasn't right and we should wait a while longer. I expected she would take it like I did and we would have a civil conversation, but I was blindsided when she had a blowout. She asked why I changed my mind. I again told her I agreed with her initial response and feel it best if we kept things as they are for now. She told me, "Jesus, you're holding it against me because I took time to think about the biggest decision of my life?" I told her she didn't tell me she had to think about it last week. She told me no, and now I'm agreeing with her. We went round and round on this for a few minutes, and she started getting angry. Then she got up and walked outside. I got up to follow her, thinking she just went out to get some air, but instead she was already in her car. She gave me a disgusted look, then peeled off driving fast down the street. She'd never shown this ugly side of her before, and I was shocked and didn't like it. Even though she didn't show you this side of her before, maybe this is the real her you're seeing now. I'll admit I was more than a little miffed by her reaction and didn't call or text her the rest of the night, nor did she contact me. I wonder what she's up to. On Sunday, I was thinking about calling her, but thought, let's see how long she can go without calling me, and maybe a cooling off period would be good for both of us. When I didn't hear from her by 6, I called and left her a message, then followed up with a text around 9 o'clock Sunday evening. She finally called me back around 10:30, and we ended up talking until after midnight. Now listen to what goes on here. On the call, we decided, or should I say, she decided, we needed some time apart to recalibrate our relationship. Guys, if a woman tells you that, that's never good. I went along with it. You dummy. But it made me feel uneasy and I started questioning things between us even more. We spent the next week apart. However, Wendy was calling me at least once a day. On every call, she'd tell me how much she missed and loved me, but didn't seem in any hurry to end our little separation. Now remember that. She wasn't in any hurry to end the separation, even though she was telling him, "Oh, I love you and I miss you." Even so, I thought things were okay and we'd be back to normal in no time. This brings me to the day before yesterday when out of nowhere I received a text from one of Wendy's friends who I'll call Deborah. Now let's see what Deborah wants. She said she needed to tell me something and wanted to see if I had time for a call. She never called me before, so I called her right back thinking it was some kind of emergency. When she answered, she said she had something personal to tell me and wanted to do it in person. I asked if she could give me a clue, and she said she'd rather wait until we met. I couldn't wait to hear what she had to tell me, so I agreed to meet her that night at a local bar. When we met, she told me for the past week, Wendy has been seeing a guy she met through work who I will call Randy. So predictable. Whenever they start acting strange, I can almost guarantee 9 times out of 10, there's someone else. There's something else going on. He works for a company that has some connection to Wendy's company, and he recently got divorced. According to Deborah, he had been hitting on Wendy for months, and she finally went out with him that Saturday when she left my place. So isn't that something? She was just telling her boyfriend, yes, I'll marry you. And then when he rebuffs her, she runs off and goes to this guy's place. Unbelievable. I told Deborah that Wendy and I had a big argument that night and she left my place in a huff. Deborah said she knew because Wendy told their friend group about it. See, these women cannot keep a secret. They have to tell someone, and in this case, she told a whole group of friends. How stupid. According to Deborah, after leaving my place, Wendy met up with Randy somewhere and then ended up spending the entire weekend with him. Well, listen, she just didn't do that on the spur of the moment. I would bet dollars to donuts she had been seeing this Randy for some time. This explained why Wendy didn't call me until late Sunday evening and why she requested time apart. I was pissed and knew our relationship was over as there was no coming back from this. Right on, mister. Deborah told me she knows this will end her friendship with Wendy, but she didn't care as she couldn't live with herself knowing I was being played. Well, that's a good woman. She also told me Wendy's other friends knew this too and warned me to be careful talking with them. Yeah, you definitely have to do that because their loyalty is to their friend. They may smile in your face, but behind your back, they're actually talking you down. He says, I believe Deborah because she is an honest person and the only one out of Wendy's friend group that seemed decent. Well, that's a red flag right there. If your girlfriend is hanging around people that you don't think are decent, then chances are she's probably not decent. Deborah said she was appalled by Wendy's conduct and she hasn't spoken to her since finding this out. She told me she wasn't going to say anything to Wendy until after I did whatever I was going to do about the situation. I thanked her and told her I'd let her know, and we parted ways. I, of course, was really upset by all of this and spent the rest of the night feeling an incredible sense of anger and loss. Well, that's understandable. Yesterday at work, Wendy called me 3 times and left me messages, but I didn't respond. I wanted to wait until I got home to talk to her as I planned to break up with her over the phone. Good for you. I was seething at that point and didn't want to be anywhere near her. On my way home, I was playing things through in my head and knew the first thing she'd do after I did that was come straight over to my place. So to prevent a confrontation, I went home and packed an overnight bag and got a room at a hotel near my office. I ended up calling her around 7. When she answered, she asked where I was and why I hadn't called her back today. I was fuming at that point and didn't waste any time with the small talk. I told her I knew she had been cheating on me with Randy. She went completely silent, but I could hear her breathing heavily. When she didn't say anything, I told her we were done and hung up on her. Wow, that was savage, but you know what? That's how you should handle these kind of situations. There's no need to talk. Just tell her, hey, I know you're cheating, I'm breaking up with you, and goodbye. An hour later, she called and left me a message saying she was at my apartment and was asking where I was. She called back again 15 minutes later stating she was inside now and was going to stay there until I came home. So he must have given her a key. All night she kept calling and texting, crying and saying she could explain everything and that her relationship with this Randy wasn't what I thought. No, it was probably a hell of a lot more. That's where things are between us as I type this. I'm glad it's over, but I just realized the huge void I now have in my life. I keep thinking, did I do the right thing? Did I give up on us too soon? Can a couple come back from this? These are the things I'm thinking about and I'm struggling for direction. I still love her, Are you insane after she cheated on you? And really can't imagine life without her, but I also can't imagine being with her after what she did. I feel lost in the fog. And that's the end of his post. And now we're going to take a look at some of the comments he got back. But before we do that, I want to remind you, if you've liked what you've heard so far, be sure to hit that like button right now and also leave a comment. That will help out this channel tremendously and also help to get this video seen by people all over the world. Now let's take a look at some of those comments. The first one is from a guy. He says, what would you call a person who is a liar, a cheater, and is mentally abusive? I would call that person hazardous waste and wouldn't want to be anywhere near them. What she showed you most recently is who she really is. That's what I said. Do you want to go through life sleeping with one eye open and wondering if she's off again screwing Randy or some other Chad she storms off to when you have an argument? Cut her loose and don't look back. After a few months, you won't even miss her. The next response is from a woman. She says, at a minimum, I think you owe it to yourself and to her to have a sit-down discussion and get all your feelings on the table. Why would he want to do that? She obviously cares deeply for you. Well, if she does, she has a hell of a way of showing it. And deep down, I can tell you really don't want to lose her. My husband and I went through something like this, although I didn't do anything with the guy in my case. Yeah, sure, lady. I just wanted to go out with another man before I got married to make sure I was making the right decision. I was, and I did, and we've been married for 19 years now. I hope you and Wendy can work through this. And the next response is from another woman. She says, why are guys so uptight about the physical act of X and taking ownership of their partner's bodies? Yes, it's important, but not as important as the bond you have with your true partner. I've been married to my husband for 36 years, and we both cheated on each other early in our marriage. We stayed together because we loved each other and eventually got into polyamory. Eventually that fizzled out for us, and we've been monogamous for the last 17 years and plan to stay that way forever. I can't imagine life without him, and I know he feels the same. Don't let your emotions ruin your life. Whatever this guy does, hopefully he doesn't take advice from her. And finally, we have another response from a guy. He says, take it from me, breaking up with her was the right thing. My first wife cheated on me a few years into our marriage. She was remorseful and I decided to forgive her, but I never really did. Even though we stayed together another 4 years, I was miserable every day, even though she was doing everything right. That's because you'll never get that out of your mind. Eventually, I ended things and it was very hard on her, but I felt like a new man. All the burden was gone and it felt like a weight had been lifted from my chest. I'm remarried 8 years now and happier than ever. Life does go on, my friend. And that's a look at some of the comments he received. And now we're going to take a look at his final update, which came 7 weeks later. He says, against the advice most of you gave, I decided to meet with Wendy to hear her side of the story. For what? I wanted to see what she'd say and if she'd be honest with me. You're asking her to be honest after she cheated on you? Come on. We met 3 days after my first post at a park where we used to take walks. We sat at a picnic table in one of the pavilions far enough away from other people to have privacy, but within view of others so things wouldn't get out of hand. Well, that was pretty smart because you always want to have witnesses when you're meeting with someone like that. I arrived 15 minutes late and she was already sitting at the bench waiting for me. I could see she was nervous when she got up to hug me. I hugged her, but not like I used to, more like the kind of hug you give a distant cousin who you haven't seen in a few years. She right away went into saying she was so sorry and didn't mean it. She said her relationship with Randy wasn't what it appeared, and they only started talking after we were having trouble after she turned down my proposal. He says, that's funny, I didn't know we were having problems. That's because you weren't, because she was just using that as an excuse to get with this Randy. I then asked her to tell me the truth about her relationship with him. She said it was just a friendship and they relied on each other during difficult times. I asked her how long she'd been speaking to him and she said they met through work last year and had talked several times throughout the year, and their friendship grew when he started going through his divorce. She said she never told me about him because she didn't think it was a big deal. He was just another someone she dealt with at work. I then asked when did their friendship become more. She said after he got divorced, he confided in her one day when they were talking on the phone. She said they had a good conversation, and that's what made her call him after I rescinded my marriage proposal. No, come on, Wendy. I guarantee you had already been with this guy before. I asked how far she had taken things with him. She said nothing if you're asking about whether I had X with him. So she's saying, no, we didn't do anything. She then asked how I even knew about him. Now listen to what our man does here. He says I lied and told her I followed her that night when she left my apartment and saw you go into his place. When she heard this, her facial expression completely changed and I could see she was getting uncomfortable. I told her I sat outside his place and waited for you to come out, but you never did. I said I went home and then came back the next morning and your car was still there. By this time, the tears were flowing and she was looking away from me, rubbing her hands together. That's because she was busted. And that was smart of him to make up that story because she could have told him anything. I told her, why lie? Why not just tell me the truth? She said because she didn't want to lose me. Heavily crying now, she told me they only did with each other and there was no penetration. Now I had to use code here because I don't want to get this video flagged for any reason, but means basically they were just doing things with their mouths. The OP says I didn't even bother to answer and just shook my head with disgust. She told me how sorry she was and that she had cut all contact with Randy and will quit her job if I want her to. I told her there was no chance for us ever being a couple after what she did, and the only reason I met with her is so we could both have closure. Did you really need to meet with her to have closure? You already had closure when you talked to her on the phone and you hung up on her. She continued trying to change my mind, saying we could start over or we could start the family we always talked about. See, you know what? That's a low blow there. Women know that's a soft spot for many men. Once she said that, I had heard enough and got up to leave. She got up and begged me to stay. I refused, but I did give her one last hug and wished her well before I turned and walked away, leaving her sitting there all alone and crying. Well, you know what? I wouldn't have hugged her after what she did. She sent me a text later that evening thanking me for meeting with her and asking if we could still be friends. My answer to that is no, but I didn't even bother to respond as I was still spinning after finding out the details. The following day, I called Deborah to again thank her for alerting me to what was going on and to tell her how I left things with Wendy. I told her that Wendy doesn't know she told me because I told Wendy I followed her to Randy's place. Talking to Deborah was very soothing, and we ended up staying on the phone for over an hour. So you can see where this is going. Before ending the call, she suggested we should get a coffee sometime, and we met up that Saturday. We really hit it off and have been dating ever since. I didn't tell Wendy about this, but Deborah did, and that ended their friendship. Well, two things about this. Okay, hats off to this Deborah for telling him what was going on with his girlfriend. But also, I bet Deborah was sitting back there and she was interested in him. And as soon as she saw an opening, boom, she went for it. And I can't blame her. Deborah said she doesn't care, and she's referring here to the fact that, hey, that ended their friendship, as she had already written Wendy off. Wendy has since tried reaching out to me a couple times, but I haven't responded and don't plan to. I'm taking things slow with Deborah, but I can already see the difference between her and Wendy. Deborah is a high quality person, unlike Wendy, who turned out to be nothing more than common table scraps. Before signing off, I want to thank everyone who responded. Your comments helped me work through this difficult time, and I really appreciate it. And that's the end of his story. Now, like I said up front, in the beginning of this story, this guy really took it on the chin when his girlfriend turns him down, and then he finds out she was cheating on him. But once he did find out she was cheating, man, he dropped her fast, and that was the right thing to do. And I like how he did it. He just did it over the phone saying, hey, listen, I know you've been cheating with Randy and we're done, and then hanging up on her. Now, where he made a mistake is he went and met with her in person, but even though he did, he wasn't pulled back into the relationship. Now, the only caution I would give him is jumping into this relationship with Deborah. It's fine to be going out with her and dating her, but take it slow. He says he is taking it slow, but I think this guy is someone who likes being in relationships, and I think he might just jump back into this relationship with this Deborah with both feet, and that would be a mistake. So those are my thoughts, and now I'd like to hear from you. What did you think of this story? How would you handle a situation like this? Have you ever been in a situation like this? Do you agree with how this guy handled it? Tell us about that in the comments. Also be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel, and I will talk to you on the next one.